We were there for a full year. By that time, the war was beginning to turn against the Germans. There were a couple of people in the camp in Navaki who were also involved in the underground, which we didn't know much about. But what we did learn was that they had hidden shortwave radios. Shortwave radios. So they could listen to radio, and they were getting all the reports of what was going on with the war. My father's father was very sick back home. He was still at home. And my father was actually given permit to go visit his sick father as long as the rest of the family stayed in the camp, as we were the hostages. He also had some money hidden away. So every time he came, he went back twice. And every time he came back, he brought some money with him, which was hidden in his clothes, wherever. So that later on, when we needed the money, we were able to bribe villagers and so forth. So we were hearing all this news about the war turning against the Germans. And then we started hearing rumors that there are paratroopers being dropped into Slovakia by the Allies. And the next thing we knew, one morning we woke up in the camp and we see all the guards being surrounded by civilians who have weapons, and they're being stripped of their weapons, of their arms and their uniforms, and locked up in the barracks that were empty. This was the resistance that suddenly came, and they started a revolution against the pro-Nazi Slovak government. This was in the spring of 1944. Shortly after the invasion of Normandy and so forth. So it was a revolution, a partisan revolution.
Were they Jewish resistance fighters?
There were a lot of Jews among them, but they were mostly Christians and Russians. And there were some Americans there too. However, there were not many places that we could go to. But one city was named the capital of free Slovakia. It was a city called Banská Bystrica. So we left the camp and we went to this city, to Banská Bystrica. This is 9. So we moved to Banská Bystrica. I know we had a lot of walking to do. And the reason I remember is by the time we got to Banská Bystrica, my feet started to hurt me terribly. I could barely step on my feet. And my parents had to find a place to live so that I could get off my feet. And I ended up in a local hospital. But the hospital was full of wounded resistance fighters. So they put me in a crib. That was the only bed that they were able to find. I was 9 years old. After a few days, whoever was in the crib was released. Whoever was in another bed was released, and they put me in that bed. And then I saw another soldier, a wounded soldier, being put in the crib. And I said, no. Put me back in the crib. Let that man be able to straighten his legs out. I was so conscious of these fighters. I was grateful to them. So we stayed in Banská Bystrica for about a month. And eventually they had to release me from the hospital because they needed every single bed because the fighting was really turning against the resistance. Germany sent 50,000 troops into Slovakia, armed troops, to crush the uprising. So we knew that the uprising was not going to last much longer. So what do? Where do we go? And my father says there's only one place that we can try, and that is to go to the mountains. And he also managed to meet someone, a forger, and pay him to issue us identity papers with our previous names, I don't know what the hell the name was, and stating that we are Lutherans. So we had those documents just in case. They were days away.
On foot?
On foot. But there were hundreds of people on the roads running away, Jews and Christians, other people. You know, the Germans, the fact that... So we're on the open roads for several days. We slept in barns. We slept in fields, grain fields. And then finally we see the forests in the distance. So fine, we'll go and hide in the forest, you know. But that particular day, there was a storm, a rainstorm. It was horrendous. And we're on the open road at this point. There's no place to hide. So we're soaking wet, and we're heading towards the forests which we see in the distance. And it starts lightning and pouring rain. There's no place to hide. There's no place to find shelter. And we finally reach the forest. And it's just about nighttime. And all of a sudden we see searchlights. Searchlights scanning the periphery of the forest. So there were Germans in the distance on vehicles of some kind, and they're looking for people. So we get deeper and deeper into the forest, and the rain is coming down. It was beyond belief. And it's pitch black, and in the forest you can't see. So you're tripping over fallen trees and things like that. And everybody is running. I mean, there were a lot of people. Everybody is running in any direction they could find. And all of a sudden, in this downpour, I noticed that Eva, my sister, is not with us. And I say to my parents, "Where is Eva?" And we stop, and we don't see Eva. And we start calling her name with the rain coming down. "Eva, Eva, Eva, where are you? Where are you? Come and find us. We're here in the you know." So my father says, all we can do is keep going and hope that by the morning the rain will stop and we may find her. Finally, towards dawn, the rain has eased up. And the sun started coming out, coming up. And the rain ended. And there we are in the forest, just the three of us, not having any idea of where to look for my sister, not seeing any other people. So my father says, "Well, we can't stay here." He says, "I'm going to go look around to see if there is any sign of humanity or whatever." And I said, "Dad, please don't leave us. Don't leave us. You're liable to get lost." And I started to cry. And he says, "Paul, I promise you I will find you. I promise you I will come back and find you." And my mother put her arms around me and held me. And my father disappeared in the darkness. About an hour went by. It was one of the longest hours of my life. My father came back. So we began our trek. The sun was out that day. We were drying out a little bit, a little more comfortable. We had very little food left. And we're going along this stream for several hours. And finally we come upon a small hamlet. About 10, 12 houses underneath a mountain. So at this point, the only choice we have is to try and find shelter in one of the homes. So we go to the first house, knock on the door. They open the door and they say, "Who are you? What do you want here?" Not friendly at all. So my father tells them that we escaped the Germans along with lots of other people. And we are looking for a place to dry out, to get some food. They say, "No, we don't want you here. You might be Jews and we don't like Jews, so go away." So we went from house to house, this time with the papers showing. And finally we come to one house at the end, almost at the end of this village. We come to this big house. We knock on the door and the landlord comes to the door and says, "Who are you? What do you want?" And he says to us, are you by any chance Jews?" And my father says, "No, look it up. You know, we're Lutherans. You know, we've been Lutherans all our lives, blah, 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 blah. Please, we need a place. We need a shelter. We need some place to dry out. We need some food." And the man seemed sympathetic. And he calls his wife to come and join him at the door. And he's now telling her what we're looking for. And the two of them agree that we should come and stay with them. So they bring us into their house. We ended up staying with this family for a couple of months. But they kept assuring us that the Germans would never come to that village because we were so high up in the mountains. And that it's going to start snowing pretty soon because winter sets in early. And the Germans will never be able to pass through those roads and whatever, and fields because of the deep snows. So that comforted us. And my father started helping the men of the house. And my mother took on sewing, and she was making dresses for the little kids. They had some fabric, and they liked us. They accepted us. So it was not easy. So one morning we wake up, we look out the window, and there are Germans all over the village. They had these treaded trucks, you know, like tanks, and the snow didn't bother them, and they came into the village, and before long they start going from house to house and checking identity papers and asking questions, and whether we're Jews, whether we're hiding there, they were suspicious of anybody. And two Germans came into the house to identify us. They walked out, they were satisfied. But, our hearts were pounding. We're scared. So we're getting ready to go to bed. Pounding on the door, on the front door. The landlord goes and opens the door. There are 3 German soldiers standing there. One of them was an officer, wore an officer's uniform, and the 2 soldiers were ordinary soldiers, I guess. And they come walking into the house without being asked. And the officer says, "We need a place to sleep." Now this house, and finally the officer says, he points to a bed, which is the bed that my father and I slept in. And he says, "I'm going to sleep in that bed." So the three of us are trying now to squeeze into my mother's narrower cot. And I'm trying to get in there, and the officer sees what's going on there, and he says, "Oh, the kleiner Bursch kann mit mir, he can sleep with me." I didn't want to sleep with him. My parents didn't want me to sleep with him because I'm a Jew and I'm circumcised. And the peasants are not circumcised. So by accident he could discover that I'm a Jew. So they're telling him, "No, no, no, we can manage." And he says, "No, let the kleine Bursch sleep with me." We did not want to push it too hard. My mother dressed me in 2 pairs of long johns, one facing this way, one facing that way. And I went and laid down in the bed next to the officer, who fortunately turned his back to me and fell asleep right away. And I stayed awake all night long holding my mother's hand. And she stayed up all night long holding my hand. And my father stayed awake all night long, being alert and wondering what's going to happen. It was one of the most harrowing nights of my life. The Germans left. They stayed in the village for about a week. They would come into the house every single day to check documents, to make sure that somebody else didn't get in there. One night, it's about the 7th night, there's pounding on the door. We're all asleep. The landlord gets up, goes to the door, opens the door. There's another German officer shining his flashlight into the landlord's face and then into the house through the open door. And he doesn't say anything, he just pushes the landlord aside, walks in. Now everybody's in bed, and he goes from one person to the next, shining the flashlight into their faces. It finally comes to my mother, who's wide awake, and he says to her in German, "I know you can speak German because I know you are a Jew. You are here with your husband and your son. The villagers have betrayed you that you are here in this house. I took their report. We are leaving here at dawn. I came to warn you to leave this village as soon as you possibly can, because there'll be another contingent of soldiers coming in here in a few days. And next time around, I won't be here to protect you." So we asked him, we said, "We have to leave." The German told us that we should leave, because there'll be other Germans who are tougher, blah, 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 blah. And how could we leave here? He says, "Well, I know one of the farmers who has a horse-drawn sled, and he knows people in other villages. I'll talk to him first thing in the morning." The following day, we got in the sleigh, the horse-drawn sleigh, and we set out, trusting this farmer. Okay. So we're going through these beautiful, snowy, romantic-looking scenes, and hours later we get to another village, a large, much bigger village. And he goes directly to one of the houses, and he says, "I know the people in this house. Let me see what I can do." And he goes in, and a short while later he comes out, and he says, "They would like to meet you." So she sort of tries to get to know us and wants to hear our story, and we go through the same story line over and over. And she says, "Well, you seem like very nice people. I guess I could let you stay here." So we stay with them, we settle in with them. And she gets to know us, and she seems to like us. And she tells us that the Germans do come to the village periodically, but she has a place to hide us. And she takes us down under the barn. There is a cellar. And she says, if the Germans come, rather than having to answer questions or anything, I think it's best if you just hide down here. Fine. And sure enough, the Germans came periodically, and we would hide in the cellar. And sometimes we'd stay down there for a day, sometimes for 2 days. And we would hear the Germans directly above us in the barn, going through the bags of grain and the hay and so forth and so on. Finally, Christmas approaches. And the men come home from the coal mines. And there's one young guy, he is their son-in-law. The moment he walks into the house and he sees us, he says, who the hell are these people? They look like they're Jews. And his mother-in-law says, no, they're not. They're decent people. They're not Jews. I saw their papers. They're not Jews. You'll get used to them. He says, no, I won't. I don't want them here. So she and the son-in-law get into a debate, and we are shaking. So finally, he gives in, the son-in-law. And she says, treat them nicely, they're nice people. But 3 days after Christmas, it's the 30th of December, 4 days after Christmas. We wake up in the morning, and the German troops all over the village, everywhere. And before long, 2 German soldiers come walking into the house with their machine guns, you know, full uniform. They come walking into the house, and they say, all right, all men, get your coats on, go out to the street to be identified by an officer, and take all your documents with you. So all the men obey, and then these 2 soldiers proceed to check everyone else's identity papers. And when they get to my mother and to me, they look at the papers, they look into our faces, and they say, you're coming with us, get your coats on. You're coming with us. And I whispered to my mother, I said, Mother, it's over. That's it for us. And she says, no, don't give up. Something good will happen. And just before we get to the gate, one of the soldiers comes around to face us. I mean, they were talking amongst themselves. We didn't know what they were saying. And he comes to face us and says, go back. Like this, go back. Schnell, schnell, zurückgehen. Go back. So we're confused, and he says, go quickly. So we turn around and we start running into the house. As soon as we shut the door, they walk out onto the street. They let you go? We said, yes. Wonderful. A few minutes later, all the men return. And the young guy, the son-in-law, turns on me and he says, you were lying to me. The German officer took one look at your father and he said, Jew, and they led him away. So you are Jews, and I don't want you to stay here. I want you to leave right away. I don't like Jews. I hate Jews. You lied to us. And I began to sob. I began to cry and plead with this bastard. And he says, no, out, get out. I said, where are we going to go? We have no place to go. And the mother-in-law intervened and she said, leave them alone. I told you they're nice people, let them be. So he relented. And this kid, this guy is telling me that he's probably dead by now because they shoot anybody they suspect. And you know, we are besides ourselves. My father, gone. He could be dead. And you know, my mother was so strong. You know, I don't know. They took him away, the Germans. Yes, after the war. So time goes by, and one day a strange woman comes walking into the house, knocks on the door, walks into the house, and it's obvious that she is a partisan. And finally the woman of the house says, why don't you sit down? So we all sit down, we surround her, and she's telling us that she's with the partisans in the mountains, and she comes into the village periodically to find out what's going on. She says, I bring you greetings from your daughter Eva. She is up in the mountains with us. We found her lost after that big storm, and she's been with us ever since. So this partisan comes back periodically just to check on us, and time goes by, and it's beginning of March, and she comes one day and she says, listen, I'm going to tell you something you may not like. You have to leave here. The reason you have to leave is twofold. The Russian army is already on the other side of the mountains. They liberated that part of the country. The Germans are panicking. They are desperate. So they are capturing people they suspect of anything, and they kill them on the spot. They shoot them. You're going to have to leave here. You're going to have to cross over this one mountain. It's on the outskirts of the village. It's going to be a tough climb for you, but we'll try and pick a day when it's not, when the weather is better. And there'll be another group of about 5 or 6 people who will join you, and you'll cross over the mountains and you'll be free. So she says, the only thing you have to bear in mind, you cannot take anything with you. The only thing you can take is 1 day's supply of food. It should take you no more than 1 day to get across. So the day came, so just as she predicted, this strange group of people, they were all refugees, all out of hiding. We did quick introductions and we start heading for the mountain. Turns out to be a beautiful day. The sun is shining. It's a little warmer than it has been, and we start climbing. It was difficult because the snow was deep, but we are going, we are hopeful, our spirits are high, and we keep going higher and higher and higher. And by late afternoon, the weather starts to change, and the wind starts to blow, and it's blowing the snow, and it's getting darker, and it's not looking good, and we still have a while to go. We see the peak, but we still have a while to go, and snow begins to freeze up from the cold because it's getting really windy and cold, and it gets dark. So after a while, we're in pitch black darkness. Still climbing. the snow begins to freeze up. And in the darkness, I'm holding my mother's hand. And at one point I slip on the ice. And as I slip, I let go. And I start sliding down in the darkness. And I'm calling to my mother. Calling, "Mother, Mother, I can't stop, I can't stop. Please help me." And I just keep sliding. I can't, it's so icy. And I am just I'm ready to die. By this time, I am so cold. My teeth are chattering. My insides are cold. And all of a sudden, my mother, I hear her voice, and she's sliding down. She laid down on the snow and just let herself go. And she landed right near me. It was a miracle. It was a miracle. It was a miracle. It's hard to believe. And she's holding me close to her to keep me warm. And she says, "Paul, just keep it up." Oh, she had some sugar left in her pocket, raw sugar. And she was giving me the sugar because she said it will give you energy. I'll never forget that. And finally, it begins to dawn. And we look around and we see down below, at good distance, is a forest. So my mother says, "Well, we have no choice but to go down." And by late afternoon, we're in the forest, and we reach this group of log cabins. So I say, "Mother, we have no choice. No matter who it could be, we have no choice." And I go and I knock on the door. And a moment later, the door opens, and it's a Russian partisan. A partisan. And he says, "Что хочешь? What do you want?" And I tell him as best I can that we crossed over the mountains escaping the Germans, and we got caught in a storm, and we are hungry and we are cold. Could they please provide us with some food and some place we can sleep? And he says, "Come on into it." He invites us to come in. So then the questions started. Where are we from? Where are we? We told him where we are from, the town. He said, "Your town was liberated in November. This is March. So you did the right thing." And they couldn't be nicer, the Russians. And about, 2 days later, 3 days later, we said, "Well, it's time for us to trek, find our hometown." So they gave us instructions, they gave us some food. When we reached our home, we got off a freight train. I saw the sign at the station as the train slowed down. There were no passenger trains. We hitchhiked and all kinds of devices, all kinds of means of travel. We get on this freight train, it goes in the direction of our town, like two lost souls, holding hands and walking into, well, wait, where is our home? We don't know where our home is because the town has changed somewhat. But before that, there are two places that I recognize. One is City Hall, which we're right in front of it, and directly across the street is our synagogue. Except all the windows on the synagogue are broken, and the outer walls are scorched from a fire. And my mother says, "All right, what do we do now? We don't know where to go. We don't know anyone in town. I'm sure there are no Jewish people here. Nobody is going to take us in." And we continue walking on the main street, and all of a sudden we hear somebody calling us by our first names. "Serena, Paul, Serena." And I turn around, and there's a Mr. Weissman who we knew who was a good friend of our family, looking out a window, and he recognized us. And he comes running out of the house, and he's embracing us, he's hugging us. He says, "Oh my God, you survived. There's so few of us left." I said, "What are you doing here?" He says, "We were in a village, hidden away all through the war by a farmer who they paid off, whatever. So we went to their home, they greeted us, it was a celebration. We were filthy, we were lice infested. Our clothes, we were dirty. You know, we didn't wash ourselves, except occasionally at a railway station, you know. Anyway, so they gave us, we stripped all our clothes, they gave us big towels or what, sheets. We covered ourselves, we took baths. And got into bed and we slept. And when we woke up, they fed us, literally, and we had not eaten anything decent. And we had to tell them the whole story. And they told us their story. And they said, "You're going to stay here. When the war ends, hopefully, your father and your sisters will return." So we stayed there. And a few days went by, about a week. And who shows up but my sister Eva? She crossed over the mountains too. So we are now 3. People start, the war ends on the 5th of May. There's a fire engine running through the main street, up and down, and they're blowing horns. The war is over. The war is over. It's peace. Everybody is celebrating. And we are happy that the war is over, but we don't have family. In a matter of a week or 2, we see people appearing, coming into town with shaved heads, men wearing striped coats. They were refugees from the concentration camps who survived. And we would ask them, "Did you by any chance come across Armin Grunfeld or Zsuzsa?" You know, no. One day another man comes and approaches us, still in the striped uniform. He says, "Your father is alive." I said, "How do you know?" He says, "Because we were together in Bergen-Belsen when the Americans liberated us. So your father should be home soon." Eva gets on the first train she could get to and goes to Bratislava. There's a place where the Jewish something or other, people were gathering there, waiting and looking for survivors. And Eva is there for a day or 2, and all of a sudden she notices my father. So she gets on the telephone and tells us, "I found Father. He is here with me." And 2 days later they were home, they got on a train and they came home. In the middle of the night, they came home. He was thin like a stick, and his nose was broken because one of the capos, you know what the capos were? Hit him across the nose with his, or hit him with a club for something that he did. So my father had a crooked nose for the rest of his life.
How did?
Then my father told us that he heard that Susan was alive. An American chaplain, Jewish chaplain, was traveling from camp to camp, meeting survivors, And if they had names to share of somebody who might be in another camp, he would try and find them. And this chaplain came back after a period of time and looked up my father and said, "Your daughter is alive in Bergen-Belsen. I saw her, I spoke to her. And I think there's someone else with her, a relative." It was my father's sister. One of his sisters, my aunt Gisela, who was living with my grandfather, who was murdered the first day after they got to Bergen-Belsen. But she befriended a Jewish doctor who brought her into her barracks. And then she found out that Susan was alive. She was sick with typhus and went looking for her and found her and rescued her from the so-called hospital, brought her into her barracks. And she and the doctor, they were stealing food and whatnot. Susan had typhus, and they brought her back to relative health. And the two of them came home together. So my family, my immediate family, and my one aunt out of three.
The other two perished.
Yeah.
And your uncle.
And my uncle perished also. I was so happy to be alive and to have my family back with me. That's all that mattered to me for a long time. When we went back to my home, the anti-Semitism was horrible.
Afterwards.
Just horrible. And my father was debating whether we should stay on there or whether he should restart his business, because a lot of the farmers found out that my father was back, and they came in droves to ask my father when he's going to restart buying up the harvests and so forth and so on. My father said, "I don't have any money, I can't do anything." And they said, "Mr. Grunfeld, we know you, you're an honest man. We're not worried about when you will pay us." And eventually my father rebuilt his business, so we stayed for a while. It was around the people in town, in school, the kids. They made my life miserable. You know what they would do? They would stop you on the street and they say, "How come the Germans took away 1,000 of you and 2,000 of you are coming back?" I'll share another story with you. After we changed our name, I came to school one day. I hated the kids in school. They were all what we call shkutzim, which is a Yiddish word for Jew haters, miserable people. Anyway, I came back to school with a document which I presented to my teacher, stating that we had changed our name from Grunfeld to Galan. So she calls the class to attention and says, "Class, I want you to know that as of today, the Jew Grunfeld will be known as Galan." And at that point, she turned around to the blackboard and started writing a lesson on the blackboard, while all the kids jumped on me, punched me around, and as soon as she turned around, they were back in their seats.